speak to us Dr. Eddie Ramirez. We all know him, and those who don't, you're in for a treat. I was intrigued by the title, The Biology of the Sabbath. So I'm going to listen very intently. Thank you.
Thank you. Right there. That's better, huh? Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So we're going to change the topic a little bit tonight, this morning. So let me just send this here, right there. So I do a lot of research. This is a few of the research that we've been doing lately. Very interesting paper here on how doing things that go against your conscience, that actually has a very negative effect on your mental health. So whatever, the truth as you know it is, you should follow in that direction. This other one on effect that lavender oil has on anxiety. See, one of the ways that anxiety is treated many times is through the use of benzodiazepines, medications such as Xanax and so forth. Those medications work like magic. The problem is that you become addicted to the medication. And then when you try to remove the medication, man, it is quite the struggle to try to remove that medication. So in this study, we're documenting how lavender oil taken in an oral form has almost the same effect as that Xanax without the addictive component that these benzodiazepines have. This other one demonstrating how cholesterol actually decreases quite fast in a matter of weeks as the person switches to a whole food, plant-based diet and a few more lifestyle changes. Cholesterol numbers will actually decrease very fast on the person that makes those lifestyle changes. This other one, the importance of vitamin D. You can live in Australia where you guys have wonderful sunlight here, pretty much the whole year, and be vitamin D deficient. Why? Because people spend too much time indoors. So you get this vitamin D if you are outside. But there are people that, go out driving and so forth, go to their work, and they're inside their buildings the whole day, then go out again, go home, and go inside buildings, and they don't spend time outside. I mean, you guys have wonderful nature reserves. I saw when I got to the apartment where I'm staying that there is a nature reserve 5 kilometers from where I am. So I went running 5 kilometers to go to that nature reserve there. You can see, all kinds of birds and beautiful creatures there. This other one on the effects of activated charcoal. So in this study, we have this spider that is very poisonous. You want to see something nasty, go to your Google and put brown recluse necrosis. Type those 3 words if you want to see something nasty. This spider is actually more poisonous than a rattlesnake. Now, you usually don't die out of this spider bite because it's a tiny little thing. But it does have very powerful, poison, this spider. And in some people, it actually causes necrosis. The skin literally dies when it bites you. So in this study, we're documenting that poultices of charcoal have the ability to decrease how severe the poison is going to affect you, and the healing process takes place much faster. This other one documenting how exercise actually the fitness starts to increase very fast. In a matter of days, your fitness starts increasing when you start implementing an exercise program. And as we were talking about yesterday, for those that missed it, there's many studies that document that your fitness is related to your longevity. How much exercise you can do is related to how long you're going to live. Therefore, it's so important to be physically fit. And this is what we're demonstrating here. As a person implements an exercise program, their fitness starts to improve actually quite fast. So this is something that we can all learn from that. This other one, published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, documenting how sexual behavior actually has an effect on your mental health. Sexual relationships outside of the context of marriage are not the best things for your mental health, as we document here in this study. It's a huge sample, more than 5,000 people here in this sample. We'll be talking about mental health later on throughout the week. And this other one, documenting how abstract thinking exercises actually have a positive effect on those people that are trying to quit smoking. And the reason why this works is because the area of the brain that is being affected when somebody is having issues with addictions, we're going to be talking about that in the second part of today's program. That has to do with the frontal lobes of the brain. So, when you do abstract thinking exercises, you're literally strengthening your frontal lobe. And your frontal lobes are what are being impaired when somebody has an addictive relationship. So by improving the frontal lobe, you're more likely to conquer your addictions. And that's why it's so important that we do things to improve the frontal lobe function. And this other one, also very interesting study, how people that have a background of sexual abuse, sadly, more likely to go into addictive behaviors. Could be a way to deal with the pain and trauma that happened to cause. So you can find my research there on that ResearchGate page. These studies and many, many more. There's more than 165 published research projects there. There's also a Twitter account there, EddieRDMD. It's a YouTube page. And also, if you want to come and travel with me around the world, there is that Instagram page if you want to see what I am seeing around the world. So today, I want to talk to you about evidence matters. Why is evidence so important? Today we live in a world in which there are multiple competing philosophies. And especially as I travel to places like Australia, New Zealand, I see that philosophies such as postmodernism and so forth are very prevalent. But the reality is that you cannot run away from evidence. For example, I could tell you, oh, my family, it comes from this origin or that origin. But the reality is that when you do the genetic test, that's when the evidence comes up. That's what really is going to tell you, okay, yeah, you're actually coming from these people's groups and these people groups and so forth. This is actually my little bit of my genetic background personally. So it's interesting, in America, in the state of Ohio, the architects there built the first postmodernist building, they say. So it's the weirdest thing ever. So you go to that place, and it has like these stairs that go to nowhere. You open these doors, and they don't go anywhere. And it's just the weirdest building ever. Now, the funny thing about this place is that the foundations are not postmodernist. They just didn't go, okay, let's just throw some sand and some rocks and let's see if this thing holds on. No, the foundations of this building are not postmodernist. They had to follow, the traditional method so that the building could hold. So when you start analyzing some of these philosophies, you're going to see that sometimes the foundation is not there. If not, the whole thing would collapse. So let me show you something very interesting that you can see about evidence. See, leprosy is something that continues to affect people, even in today's world in which we have, the tools and medication to stop this. Leprosy continues to affect many people around the world. In the past, before we had the tools to treat the leprosy, leprosy would kill many people, including Australia, including Europe, and so forth. And as Dr. Rosen says, fear of all other diseases taken together can hardly be compared to the terror spread by leprosy. Leprosy is a very nasty disease in which starts, affecting your areas of the body that are the farthest away from your central body. And they were thinking some theories in the old days that maybe it was caused by hot food, maybe it was thought that you got it from eating garlic and so forth. But the reality was that some people even said, this is because of the position of the planets, The planets were in the wrong position. That's why you end up getting this disease. And we know now today that that's not necessarily true. And this disease would come and start affecting young and old around the world. In fact, in the 14th century, the Black Death took 60 million people. Don't miss, not this Saturday, but next Sabbath, we're going to be dealing with that topic of the infectious diseases. You don't want to miss that topic in a week from now. Now, it's interesting that when you look at the Bible, they actually had some very good solutions to many of these health problems that these people used to have in the old days. For example, this principle in Leviticus 13:46 is fascinating. Look at what it says there. As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. The problem of leprosy, we would have controlled it if we would have followed this principle. If somebody has one of these infectious diseases, separate him from the rest of the people because he can infect the other people. In fact, we use this principle on every hospital. Go to any hospital here in Australia, and they're going to have what they call the quarantine rooms. So when something is like very infectious and so forth, the person is separated from the rest of the hospital because we know that that disease can jump and then you can start infecting many more people. The Black Death, leprosy, and many other countless diseases, we could have controlled them if we would have followed this principle that has been written there for thousands and thousands of years. So, by following that, actually, some areas in Europe, when they were in the middle of the Black Death, by implementing that principle, they were able to stop some of this focus of disease. Now, is the Bible actually true? Well, there are very interesting stories from England, the motherland here of you guys here in Australia. And if you study the history of England, there came a point in which sewer used to just run everywhere in the streets of London. I was actually literally in London a week ago. And people used to just go to the bathroom and just throw the sewer down the streets. Imagine the problems that caused. So diarrheal diseases and infectious diseases were everywhere there. Plus the wrong type of fashion. You know, the ladies used to wear these very long dresses that used to drag in the floor. Imagine that, you know, going through those streets where this, human waste was just running around. Man, you would just bring that stuff to your home, and the probability of getting sick was very high. So it was very common to see, dead bodies there. And because it was so busy with so many dead people, many times the deceased body was just there laying there for many, many days. Does the Bible have anything to give us counsel about this? Well, one of the persons that started the change there in England is Edwin Chadwick. And Edwin Chadwick started proposing that in order to control those infections, what London needed to do was to build a proper sewage system so that human waste would be removed in a proper way. Also, he proposed that they shouldn't be putting the dead bodies too close to where people were living, because he was suspecting that those dead bodies were sources of disease, so that they should rather take those bodies away from the places where people were living. And notice what the counsel is in Deuteronomy 23, 12, and 13. Designate a place outside the camp when you can relieve yourself. Talking about, when you go to the restroom. As part of your equipment, have something to dig with, and when you relieve yourself, dig a hole and cover up your excrement. For the Lord your God moves about in your camp to protect you and to deliver your enemies to you. I mean, come on, this counsel has been there for more than 3,500 years ago. Yet, in the 1700s, 1800s, London was being affected by infectious diseases for not following this counsel. It says there, this stuff is toxic, bury it, remove it as far as possible. Don't have it in close contact with humans are living. And this is what has been done. If you have traveled to places like Africa, you will see that they have these outhouses there, very commonly used. Some places in Asia also like that. Because we know in what is called today public health that this is the best thing you can do to protect communities from infectious diseases. So look at what they're saying, the undertakers. Even after the coffins had been tapped to let out the liquid products of decomposition, till maggots were seen crawling about the floor, till as the body was borne away, escaping matter ran down the shoulders of the bearers. I mean, the problem here was extremely severe from having those bodies being decomposed there, instead of quickly getting rid of those bodies so that infectious diseases would decrease. Yet, notice what the Bible counsels about somebody that passes away. You must not leave his body on the tree overnight. Be sure to what? Bury him ASAP. Again, by violating the principle that was in the Bible, London was getting in big trouble by letting those bodies decompose and so forth before getting rid of those bodies. So, in fact, in 1854, they actually sacked Mr. Chadwick because they claimed that he was promoting some heretical ideas. So it took decades. The problem continued the same, the sewer running the streets, dead bodies there for many days being decomposed, and the parliament, removing these bright men. But they just needed to follow the ideas of Mr. Chadwick and the Bible, and they would have solved a huge crisis in London. So, these recommendations that Moses gave, it's interesting that Moses, if you study a little bit history, you will see that Moses was taken into the courts of the Egyptians, and the ideas that the Egyptians had back then were actually not the best regarding health and sanitation. So Moses had to sit down in classrooms where these types of ideas were promoted. For example, you can see that the way that they were treating diseases and so forth were not the best. Yet, even though those ideas were prevalent in the world in which Moses grew up, still, he didn't bring those ideas that were very wrong when he wrote in the first 5 books of the Bible. So, another example of this, we'll come back to Moses in a minute. In Vienna, in 1847, the statistics were that if you went to give birth in one of those places that they had back then, your probability of dying was 1 out of 6. And it was something very common to see mothers that were giving birth that would end up with some severe infection and end up dying and so forth. So it was a very dreadful situation. I mean, 1 out of 6, that's a big number of females that were dying back then. And what this scientist was able to accomplish, he decreased the death rate from 18% to 1%. So what did he do to accomplish such feat? Well, Semmelweis, what he did is started promoting some ideas that they actually didn't like, and also he was sacked and demoted for trying to promote some of these ideas that would have solved the problem right there. So what they did, they started to realize that these infections were happening not because it was the way that it was supposed to be, but rather their hygiene, behaviors were not the best one. Look at what it says there in Numbers 19:11. Whosoever touches the dead body of anyone, what's going to happen to him? It's unclean for 7 days. There's a lot of wisdom there. Sometimes when somebody passes away, there's all these microbes and things. If you touch this body, you're going to be infectious. And back then, they didn't have, some of the tools that we have, such as soaps and disinfectants and so forth. So, what it says there in the scripture, if you study a little bit more, one of the things they would use is hyssop. And we know that hyssop actually contains an antiseptic by the name of thymol. And also, it talks there about the importance of, washing yourself, exposed into sunlight, and so forth. So today, we have these guidelines in the hospitals. Any hospital that you go, you're going to see, remember to wash your hands and, do it for this amount of time and so forth. In the patient rooms, you see these reminders there over and over, trying to, promote this healing and so forth. So, is the Bible actually true, or these are actually, some strange ideas? Well, these ideas that this scientist in Austria was promoting, actually, as they finally implemented those ideas, the mortality rate started to decrease quite a bit. And why is in the Bible, why do we find all these picky ideas and so forth? Why it says there in Leviticus 12, 1 and 2, that a woman is unclean after childbirth? The reason why it says that was to protect the life of that female. And now we know why. After a female gives birth, there's a lot of cutting and so forth that takes place, a lot of open wounds. So by being unclean, by separating the female from other potential infectious sources, you actually protect the life of that female. In the same story with the heart disease. Heart disease is a big killer today. Many people are being affected by heart disease. If you missed yesterday, we're talking about that. Statistics says about 1 million, people have heart attacks per year. Heart attack happens every 20 seconds, and a death secondary to heart disease occurs every 60 seconds. And among the risk factors for heart disease, we have things such as stress, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, smoking, and sedentary behavior. So basically what happens, those arteries that nurture the heart start to clog in, not enough blood reaches there, and that's what ends up triggering a heart attack. Yet notice what it says there in Leviticus 7:22. Do not eat any of the fat of the cattle, the sheep, or the goat. The fat of an animal found dead or torn by wild animals may be used for any other purpose, but you must not eat it. And this is something that is very well known today. There's a clear relationship between saturated fat and your risk of stroke and heart disease. I mean, this was written again 3,500 years ago and still is very valid. So how do we know if the Bible is actually true? The Bible itself says that all Scripture is given by the inspiration of God. And if you study the history of the Bible, you would see that different groups try to destroy the Bible. For example, in 605 BC, when Judah fell into Babylon, when the Babylonians came, they started destroying everything, yet the Bible was able to be preserved from destruction. Then later on, in 167 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes, he ordered that all the copies of those 5 books of the Bible be destroyed, yet even after that, the Bible remained preserved. And as earlier as in the Middle Ages, there was also a very strong persecution about, the Bible and so forth. And still, the Bible was preserved unto us. In the modern world, sometimes they treat the Bible as something very ancient and intolerant and divisive and judgmental and so forth. But is that what the Bible really is? when you start reading it, you're going to realize that that is actually not so. As you study it deeply, you will see that many of those messages and information that is found there is actually quite useful to our modern days maladies and problems. For example, I've been to Egypt in many occasions. A fascinating place, Egypt, lots of history and so forth. In fact, I've done seminars there for the community also there in multiple occasions. And one of the things that you can see is what type of ideas were being promoted in Egypt in the time when Moses was alive. One of the pieces of information that we have today is a papyrus by the name of the Evers Papyrus. In the Evers Papyrus, we see with great detail the recipes, the prescriptions that were used by the medical arts back then. And this papyrus, for example, gives some of the following ideas. It says that if you have an embed splinter, to put some warm blood and ass's dung. You think that's going to help you? May end up with an infection instead. And among the other ingredients that are being prescribed in that Ever papyrus are found the excreta of multiple animals, dog, cats, even flies, poopy. They even have some recipes with that. Excreta from human beings, swine teeth, putrid meat, stinking fats, and all kinds of things that today we know are not the best. Yet back then, these were the ideas that were being promoted in the time of Egypt when Moses was alive. Yet it's so interesting to me that Moses didn't take these ideas and didn't put them in the Bible that he helped to write. There's actually a copy of this Ever papyrus is found in a university in Germany. So this Ever papyrus was written in 1552 BC, and there are 877 standardized procedures of how to deal with multiple health problems from back then. So this prescription to cure pink eye, apply urine of a faithful wife. You have to have the faithful wife for that one. That didn't work. And then to embed a splinter, apply the worm of bloods and ass's dung, as I was telling you. To prevent hair from turning gray, anointed with blood of a black calf, which has been boiled in oil, or the fat of a rattlesnake. So all kinds of things. Yet the Bible in Proverbs 16:31 says that gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained by the righteous life. So, and notice this one. When it falls out, one remedy is to apply a mixture of 6 fats, namely those of a horse, hippopotamus, crocodile, the cat, the snake, and the ibex. To strengthen it, anoint it with the tooth of a donkey crushed in honey. I mean, this stuff were like what we would call today Quakery. You start promoting these type of things that are just like a placebo type of thing because they actually doesn't work. Yet notice what it says in Leviticus 13. When a man has lost his hair and is bald, he is clean. If he has lost his hair from the front of his scalp and has a bald forehead, he is clean. They didn't condemn people, that lost their hair and so forth. So among the things that they were being used there were all kinds of weird things that today we don't even want to touch it, because these things are not the best for us. And in Exodus 15, it says, if you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, and if you pay attention to his commandments and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases that I brought unto the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. And if you go and check, I was literally a week ago in the British Museum. Man, I love that museum. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's a fantastic place there with all this history from all over the world. So there's a section there for the Egyptians there. And if you analyze the things that the Egyptians were being perished by, it was things that are commonly problems of today. Heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, and so forth, diseases that it says there, if you don't follow the ways of the Egyptians, you can avoid many of these diseases. So, Acts 7:22, it says there that Moses was educated together with these other experts from Egypt. So again, Moses was exposed to the knowledge of those people back then. Yet, the Bible says that many of those things that are prescribed there, you should avoid them. Look at this other remedy. The sting of the hornet is healed by the horsefly. Crush and apply to the wound. Okay? So if you got a sting, you're supposed to get a fly, smash it, and then apply it there. Yet you don't find such prescriptions when you go ahead and read the Bible. So these important principles, such as the principle of quarantine that we were talking about, instead of bringing disease to the problem, they would say, no, if somebody is diseased, remove him far from the camp. The principle that we just saw, if somebody wants to go to the restroom, put the toilet outside the camp, away from the rest of the people. Yet, to me, this is very sad that still hygiene-related problems worldwide still are quite high in the list of the reasons why some people are dying today. And the reality, if they were to follow those principles that we are just talking about, we would avoid countless of these deaths as we would decrease, the risk of infection by cross-contamination with fecal matter and so forth. And those dietary principles are still very valid today. So as we were talking about yesterday, we were putting the reality that we are seeing young people with heart disease, the age of 19, they already, many of them in the Western world carry the principles of heart disease. And people in their younger days, this lady by 33 years old, half of the artery that nourishes the heart is already damaged by atherosclerosis. In fact, this is the news clip of a friend of mine. This is a doctor that was actually younger than me, and she died at the age of 38 years. I knew her, you would see when she would arrive in the hospital, she had this Starbucks this size and all this junk food that she would be eating and so forth. And sadly, it cut off to her. She ended up with heart disease, ended up having a heart attack, and didn't survive it at the age of 38. And that is the reality, that our choices have consequences. So, how do we know if the Bible is accurate? Well, it's actually very simple. The Bible is full of predictions. So what you need to do, you need to just go back and check those predictions and see if those predictions happen. Many of those predictions, are in the old times, so you can actually cross-check. Okay, this is the prediction, and then what ended up happening in reality. Let's go and see some of these predictions. Babylon, there's a very nice section there in the British Museum about Babylon. What is the prediction in the Bible about Babylon? Isaiah 13, 19, and 20. And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It, what? What it says there? It shall what? Shall never be inhabited. Did that actually happen? Is Babylon still not inhabited today? You can go and travel to Iraq. That's where Babylon is today. This is actually a photo from National Geographic in 2003. And here they were showing how they sent some of the soldiers there to guard the ruins of where Babylon was, because even today it still is not inhabited. So it was vulnerable, people there going and, trying to take some of those archaeological things and so forth. But that's not the case. For example, this is Mexico City. If you go into Mexico City, you will see that the old ruins of the old city, they're still there. So what they did, they destroyed that old city by the name of Tenochtitlan, was the name of that old city of Mexico City, and they rebuilt the city above it. In fact, in most cases, that's what happens. There used to be an old city, that city gets conquered, and then they rebuild the city on the old ruins. But that was not the case of Babylon. You can actually go to where Iraq is, and still is not inhabited. You can go and visit the area where that old city used to stand. Another example of this is Nineveh. Now, if you are familiar with the Bible and so forth, you know about Nineveh. What word comes to mind? Jonah. If you heard the word Nineveh. But it's funny, I'll give you this homework. Talk to somebody that is not familiar with the Bible and ask them about Nineveh. They don't know. Because Nineveh actually disappeared from the map. And look at the prediction about Nineveh. Zephaniah 2:13 and 15. And he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and will make what? Nineveh a desolation and dry like a wilderness. In the old days, they used to laugh about the Bible. Oh, look at the Bible. It talks about some Nineveh that doesn't exist. Because Nineveh had disappeared from the map, we didn't even know where Nineveh was. So it was one of those, points of criticism to the Bible. Oh, look at that. They're promoting some mythical place that never was and so forth. That's what they thought until they actually found Nineveh, still in ruins near Mosul, Iraq. You can literally see how the city was built around, and Nineveh still is in desolation, exactly as it was predicted unto today. Another interesting prediction, the prediction of Tyre. Tyre is in Lebanon. I understand that here in, there's a big community here of Lebanese people, Blackstown. So Tyre, there's two Tyres. There's the new Tyre and the old Tyre. So you can actually check the prediction of what was going to happen to Tyre, Ezekiel 26, 12, and 13. And they shall make a spoil of their riches and make a prey of their merchandise. And they shall break down thy walls and destroy thy pleasant houses. And they shall lay thy stones and thy timber and thy dust in the midst of the water. So what did we just read? It says, number one, the city was going to be destroyed. And two, they were going to take the pieces of the city. And what they were going to do, it says there? They're going to throw them where? To the water. It's the prediction that says there. Well, you can go and visit Tyre, and that's exactly what happened. So what ended up happening is that as this city was being destroyed, there were some nearby places where there were people there. So they gave the order to start throwing down the pieces of the broken city to the ocean in order to make bridges to reach to those areas. So you can literally go to Lebanon today and see the pieces of that city literally in the water where they made those bridges like that. Exactly happened as it was predicted there. And what about Egypt? Does Egypt exist today? Yes, I mean, I've been there, as I told you, a few times. What type of prediction is found there about Egypt? Ezekiel 29, 14, and 15. I will turn the fortunes of Egypt to the land of their origin, and they will be, what type of kingdom? Lowly kingdom. It will be the lowest of the kingdoms. It will never again lift itself up above the nations. I will make them so small that they will not rule over the nations. Fascinating prediction. If you go to Egypt, you actually get a really good deal because of how much devaluated their currency is. You can literally there go to a restaurant and eat for like $2 a full meal, because of how devaluated their currency is. This is a country, with lots of economical problems and so forth, even though it's a quite numerous people. There's millions and millions of people there. Their economy is actually not the best, very struggling economy in the country of Egypt, which has caused all kinds of political and social problems and so forth. Exactly as it was predicted this. When you go again to the museums like the British Museum, you see that Egypt used to be a tremendously rich country. There's all kinds of gold and silver and things they have found there from the time of the Egyptians. Yet today, their fortunes have been totally turned around exactly as the Bible predicted long time ago. In fact, Egypt still is there, but lowly, as the Bible predicted long time ago. And it even talks about the modern days in the Bible. For example, there's a prediction here about Europe. It says there that as you see, it's like trying to mix pieces of iron and pieces of clay, that Europe, even though there's a European Union, they're actually quite separated from one another. If you go to Europe and you confuse the Germans from the French, you're going to offend some people there, like, no, I'm not German, I'm French, and stuff like that. Even though they try that European Union to put them together, that union is having some struggles, as you've been reading in the news, England, boom, separating from them, and there's a strong movement there from the Netherlands, and a strong movement there from the French and multiple other countries that would like to actually, separate from that European Union, exactly as it was predicted. Even you try to put them together, is like trying to mix clay and iron. That's exactly what happened. And some people go and try to find wisdom in places like the psychics, Do the psychics actually give you good insight? This is a very interesting study that was done about the predictions of the psychics. Out of 250 specific published predictions by these psychics, we found that less than 3% that could list as reasonably fulfilled, and 97% that missed the mark completely. I mean, would you trust something like this? That is good just 3% out of 100. I mean, come on, this you need something a little bit more solid, isn't it, to put your weight and your trust. Yet, even though the psychics are failing in their predictions, still 3,500 years after the Bible has been written, those predictions there came to pass exactly as it was like that. Let's check some historical evidence. For example, we have flood histories that happen around the world. So if this flood actually happened, it must have left such an impression of the people that witnessed this that must have been, intertwined in their culture and so forth. So you find that there are 270 flood stories all over the world. And if this actually happened, you must have found some evidence for this. For example, Hawaii, before contact with Christians, they had the following story. They say that the first man, his name was Kuniuhona, and that the world became very wicked, and there was only one righteous man by the name of Nu'u. Fascinating, isn't it? The name there sounds kind of familiar. And they say that Nu'u built a canoe, filled it with animals, and that the waters came and destroyed the world, and only Nu'u and his family was saved. Fascinating. You can go and check these histories, before the contact with Christianity. Another one in China, again, before the contact with Christianity. This Christian classic, he tells the story of somebody by the name of Fuhi, who Chinese say is the father of their civilization. And the story of Fuhu, it says that Fuhu, his wife, and 3 sons and 3 daughters escaped a terrible big flood, and they were the only people alive, and they're the ones that repopulated again the whole earth. Again, you can go and check the historical documents. You will find the story of this Fuhi. And also, this is not the only one. In Mexico, there's written accounts there from the old natives from Mexico. And there's a subgroup of people there called the Toltecs. And they say that the first world lasted 1,716 years, and then it was destroyed by a great flood that filled the whole world, including the highest mountains. Now, if you start doing some mathematics, and notice the number 1,716 years, if you go and start doing mathematics, we know this is not completely accurate because we don't know how long Adam lived, but if you start doing mathematics, how much year the pioneers were living, you get to the year about 1656. That's pretty close, to that 1712 that the Toltecs say. In Babylonia, there's also similar stories there of how the world was destroyed by some sort of flood and so forth. And now, check on the map, okay? So I was actually in Turkey, literally a week ago I was also in Turkey. And if you see in the map, Turkey is neighboring what the Ararat Mountains are. So at the end of Turkey, then the next country there is called Armenia. So between Armenia and Turkey, That's where the mountains of Ararat are located. Now, a few years ago, as I was reading a very interesting article on National Geographic, what they were doing, they were checking the genetics of human beings worldwide, and they were studying how the genetics of humankind move across history. Now, look at this fascinating map where the genetics of the human beings started distributing throughout the whole planet. Notice where they all start. Can you see there? Notice the proximity in the Middle East right there, just very close to those Ararat mountains. You can trace the genetics of the modern humankind being distributed towards the east, towards Africa, towards Europe, and so forth. Again, this is a magazine, National Geographic, In fact, I actually did a special genetic analysis. They were actually tracing my male chromosome, the Y chromosome, back through history. It's a test that has very high resolution. You have something called the haplogroups. So, for example, if you are a female, you are XX. So your mom had the same haplogroup, and the mom of your mom had the same haplogroup. So you can trace your mom's lineage, and you can see, okay, she came originally, from a native Australian, or came from a European, and so forth, by tracing those haplogroups. We males have XY. So we can trace the X, we can trace the Y, and in the study I was doing, we were tracing the Y. My Y chromosomes come from a Native American, and they gave me the following map. Look at the map they gave me, where that chromosome originated. What do you see there? Where did it originate? Down there in Turkey, in the eastern part where the Ararat Mountains are, that's where the origin of my Y chromosome came. And then it moved all the way across the Bering Stretch, and that's how the Native Americans came down into Mexico. That's where, I picked it up from my dad's side. Exactly, as that Ararat Mountain story is about. So maybe there's something into this. How are we doing with time? I don't want to eat more time than allotted. Are we doing good? So let's just, in closing, let's check some linguistic evidence. So these are the oldest languages in the world. And these languages, as you can see, among one of the oldest languages in the world, we find the language of Chinese. And to me, this is something fascinating. So we can actually go back and study these Chinese characters. Any Chinese around here? I know there's a few of them, isn't it? So these Chinese characters, if you ask somebody to explain to you where the origin of some of these Chinese characters come from, sometimes they don't make much sense, how they combine different elements and so forth. But when you study these Chinese characters under the light of scriptures, they actually start making a lot of sense. So what they did, they started making drawings of familiar objects. For example, the word mouth, they do it like a mouth. Can you see the mouth there? It's very easy, to see where this mouth came from. It's an open mouth there. And this type of approach was used by multiple cultures. It's not something unique to the Chinese. And it uses these radicals, or called the keys or roots or primitives, and there are 214 of those radicals. And many of them are actually pictures of things from the world that they represented in a graphic format. For example, simulating a man, you can see the two legs of the man. This is very simple to understand this. Or the wings, can you see the wings there? These are the two wings there. Or the word for one, or heaven, or earth, just a line there. Two, because there's two of them. And then a man, and then somebody great. It's that same man, but now you put a line there. And then very much, you add a little thing there. Or husband or distinguished person, now you add two lines. And in the old days, when somebody lost their wife, the husband would let their beard grow. So now you can see the beard there in the word to lose, okay? The beard is growing there because the poor guy lost his wife. And heaven is the same one, but now the little line there now goes on the very top to represent something above you. So can you see they make actually sense if you start analyzing these characters. And in fact, Chinese, they cannot speak to the Japanese. They don't understand each other. But if they write the Chinese characters, they actually understand each other. Same story in Korea. Korean and Chinese, they don't understand each other. But if they write the Chinese characters, they're actually able to communicate with one to another. And we need to remember that the first Christians arrived in China in 781 AD. So it was also something to remember is that Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism came many years later after many of these characters were actually developed and deployed. And see, you can explain many of these characters with the Bible. With the Bible, they make sense. For example, the word boat in Chinese is composed of a vessel and 8 people in the vessel. Anybody has heard where you find such story? In the Bible, isn't it? You find it makes sense with the Bible. On the same day, Noah and Noah's son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and 3 of their wives and sons to them entered the ark. There were 8 people there. The word for create is dust and mud by life, and you have a walking person. And that's what we see there. Then the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. So the Chinese were actually monotheists, the very, very first ones. Later on polytheism came and so forth. So look at the name that they use for the supreme being. They call him Chang Ti or Chang Dai, which is to me so interesting because in the Hebrew Bible you find the word Shaddai. And look at the composition of this character. It is composed by an emperor that is above, or a heavenly emperor. So these Chinese characters, you can classify them in 3. You have the pictographs, which are the building blocks. You find about 600 of them. You have the ideographs. You represent an idea. and you have the phonetic characters. You put together certain characters together which help you guide of how you should say that particular word and so forth. For example, this is a pictograph idea. So you see, mother is composed by the character woman and horse. See, there's no meaning to this. They're just there, those characters, to aid you, to show you how you should pronounce and say these particular words. But it's very interesting. You can start to analyze these characters, and they start to make a lot of sense when you start to see them in the light of the Bible. In fact, many of these characters were formed very shortly after the disaster of the flood and so forth. Look at the word for spirit. Look at how it's composed, that word. That word is composed by something that is cover, water, rain, three mouths that speak for two respected persons. Fascinating, isn't it? You find this concept of Trinity and so forth, isn't it, in the Bible? These three beings in one. So two cover respected persons that speak through the Spirit. And there's many words like that. You know, the word for first. The word for first is composed that man made of dust or clay that is alive. The very first man. And the word for fire, it is men, and notice it has the fire there, a man that is in fire, maybe because if you remember there, it says that the first man didn't have clothes, he had this glory shining around him. The word for light, the first man on fire, again, making an assumption to that. And then the first home was found in the west. You have China here in the west. That's where the first home, where they move, towards the east, the Chinese people. The first men living in an enclosure. That is the word for west. And you have there, China. And then they moved to the east. Well, the west was their first home. And then the word for happiness or blessing, it is a person that is the first person together with God living in a garden. That is the word for blessing or happiness. The word for garden, we know which garden it talks about here. It is that dust plus the bread of life and two people living inside an enclosure. That's the word for garden. Then the word for covet, it's composed of two trees and a woman. Anybody heard of such story in the Bible? So you have two trees and a woman. That's what's going to give you the word for covet. And the word forbidden, to warn, to prohibit, to restrict, it is two trees and God. That's the word for forbidden. And the word for righteousness is the word for me. Notice that it's in the bottom, and above there is a lamb above me. That is the word for righteousness. So our time has run out, so we're going to have continue with the program. Thank you very much, and we'll continue in the next program. Thank you very much.